All right, everyone, so in this video, we're gonna go over how to set up DHCP server functionality. In the last video, I showed you guys how to set up the relay, so we relayed that request to the external server. That was pretty simple. The DHCP server is a little more involved in NSX-T, but it's not that much harder. It's really pretty straightforward. That said, I'm gonna be a little bold this video. I'm gonna do everything from scratch. We're gonna set up a T1, a segment. We're gonna set up all the DHCP server scopes and everything completely live, no editing here, so fingers crossed. I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully it goes well. So let's get started. We're going to set up a new T1, and I'm going to call this nerdy T1. I'll call it X. How about that? And actually, I'll call it new, so we know it's new. All right, and I'm going to connect it to that same tier 0 that we used in the last video. In this case, I'm going to be very sure to select an edge cluster. If I don't, you'll see here if I mouse over it says select an edge cluster if you plan to use stateful services such as NAT. DHCP server is also a stateful service, so you do need to select an edge cluster or you will get an error when you go to select or set up DHCP. So that said, that's good there. While I'm here, I'm going to make sure I go to route advertisement and select all connected segments and service ports. This little box right here is no doubt the biggest reason people have connectivity problems when they're learning NSX-T. So I'm going to select that as well as NAT. I don't plan on doing any NAT, but just in case. And I'm going to hit save. Now that that's configured, I'm going to close out of that. And we're going to go over to DHCP again. And this time we're going to create a DHCP profile, but we're going to make it of type server, which is a default here. So I'm going to go with nerdy DHCP server. And kind of interesting point here, it asks for an IP address. So this is the IP address of the DHCP server within NSX-T. And it also asks for an edge cluster. Interestingly enough, you don't actually have to populate either one of these. It'll actually generate an IP address for you. So I'm going to hit save, and I'll just to illustrate that point. So we see here, I got to refresh it. There we go. Nerdy DHCP server is there. You go. So it's 100.96.0.1/30, and it populated it with the default lease time, which I'm perfectly fine with that. So now we're going to go back over to tier 1. Very similar process to what we did with the relay. The only difference here, we're going to go to nerdy T1 new. The only difference is that in this case, instead of selecting the DHCP relay, we're simply going to select DHCP server. Once we have that, we just click the drop down and select the appropriate profile, which we just created. Make sure that IP address looks good. By the way, there's no additional configuration. As I mentioned, this is fully live, so I've not done anything with this IP. Everything will just work auto-magically. You'll see this time it shows local. Previously, when we did the relay, it showed remote. So this kind of shows us, gives us our first hint that DHCP is running within NSX-T. And as I mentioned, it's a centralized service, so it's actually running on your edge nodes. So I'm going to hit save. That should be good. And again, very similar to the process we did before. In this case, we're going to go create a segment for my DB tier. So we're going to use my DB01 VM. You can see I got it open right here. So we're going to go to add segment, and we're going to do db-seg. We're going to connect that to the proper T1. I believe it's this one. Yep, nerdy T1 new. For transport zone, we're going to use our overlay transport zone we've been using. This segment is going to be 10.202.1/24. That looks good. All right, so once this comes up, you'll see by default it's set to DHCP, gateway DHCP, and it's populated with that nerdy DHCP server, which is exactly what I want. I do have to, however, enable this right here so that I can configure my ranges. So in this case, I'm going to go with 10.202.0.100, and I'll set aside like 10 IPs, something like that. So 100 to 110. Make sure you hit this, add items. If you scroll down, it's easy to miss this. There's the DNS server IP down here, so I'm going to populate that. So that looks good. And you're probably wondering, by the way, oh, got to click that. You're probably wondering that, where's the default gateway? That's actually, it'll just pre-populate. It'll work. So if you do want to set up any options, though, you can click options and click this drop down and change it to generic options. And now you have the ability to set your normal DHCP code and associated values if you wanted to. In my case, I'm good with everything as it is. So I'm going to hit apply. And I think we should be good if I didn't forget anything. So let's go hit save. All right, so we set up our DB seg. Now we're going to head over to vCenter, and we're just going to connect that DB VM to that new segment. And we're going to select that one right there. That looks good. And it's connected, so we should be good. So same story as before. This time we're going to connect up to it, and I had previously had this working, but I also blew away all the configs. So you'll see there it has an IP, but that's old. That was from a previous attempt at setting up something else actually. So in this case, I'm going to give it just some kind of static IP just to get rid of that, just because I want to know if it's actually working. I don't want to get fooled. So we'll go with that. Do another IPA. Okay, now we have a different IP, so now we'll know if it changes. We'll be able to see. So I'm going to do an IF down ENS 192. That will just kill that process, and then I'm going to do an IF up ENS 192 for that interface, and this will cause it to generate a DHCP request, and hopefully we get an offer back from NSX-T's DHCP server. So here we go. There we go, right away. That was actually really quick. So it looks very similar to the relay, except in this case, we just see we got the appropriate range. So just to verify things, let me see if I can ping my default gateway. I can. So I'm good to go. If I can ping, let's see if I can ping the DNS. This is also my DHCP server that I did not use in this case, obviously. Perfect. So we're good to go. We set up DHCP server from scratch. I didn't mess up. I can't tell you how excited I am about that. So none of this stuff is scripted. I'm glad it worked out. This is why I really like NSX-T. This was super simple. I've only done it a handful of times, and it just works. So hope this was helpful for you guys. By the way, I didn't mention this is NSX-T 3.0 for those that are wondering. I always try to stay on the newest version. So that said, if you have any questions, if you run into any issues, you found the video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, all of that, you know the deal. I'll see you guys later.